Good morning, everybody. My name is Nathalie Paquet and I will be your webinar moderator today. Welcome to this 1010 webinar of the month of May. Today we will present the CEN and CENELEC processes and procedures from the very beginning, the new work item, until the publication process. And to guide you through this presentation, I'm here with my colleagues Maitane, Program Manager in the unit Sustainability and Services, and Frédéric Dufour, who is working as an administrator in the publication unit. Maitane and Frédéric, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Today we will go with you through the main steps involved in the development of a deliverable by a technical committee. From the creation of a work item, the drafting and the preparation of the text for inquiry in the case of a European standard, to the resolution of comments, formal vote and finalization of the text for publication. I would like to point out that in this presentation, Frédéric and I will focus on homegrown deliverables only, and on deliverables that are normally developed by technical committees. This is European standards, technical specifications, and technical reports. Workshop agreements are therefore not covered in the presentation. When making a proposal for a new work within an existing technical committee, this should be done by using the new work item proposal form, which is available in the CENELEC and the CEN Business Operation Support System, the CEN-BOSS, websites. The filled-in form is submitted to the TC Secretariat, and then the technical committee needs to decide on the proposal. If the technical committee agrees with the proposal, it has two possibilities. It can either decide to register the new project as a new work item directly or as a preliminary work item. It is important to remember that once a new work item is adopted or activated, the time starts running, and the default time frame for the development of the deliverable needs to be respected. Otherwise, the work item will be deleted. If the technical committee is not sure that it can deliver within the default time frame, it is advisable to register a preliminary work item. This will allow the TC to give visibility to the fact that it intends to work on a specific subject in the future, or to start working on a subject with a bit more flexibility, to a certain extent, regarding the time frame. The work item can then be activated when a first draft is available, or when the TC is sure that the deliverable can be developed within the default time frame. When I said before that the preliminary work item allows you to work with certain flexibility regarding the time frame, I meant certain flexibility because preliminary work items also have to be activated within 3 years of their creation. Otherwise, they will be automatically deleted. So what are the necessary steps to adopt a new work item or a preliminary work item? I have to say that the CEN and the CENELEC rules for this are different. So when we look at CEN, the decision to adopt or pre-adopt a work item is delegated to the technical committees. This means that the technical committee can directly take a decision to adopt a new work item when it falls within its scope. To this respect, I think it's important to underline that the decision to create or activate a new work item cannot be taken at meetings anymore. So the decision now needs to be taken by correspondence through a committee internal ballot of 2 months. The decision to create preliminary work items can still be taken at meetings, but the intention to take such a decision needs to be clearly indicated in the agenda to be able to do so. To approve the decision to create or activate a new work item, there also needs to be at least 5 countries committed to actively participate in the work. And, well, in the case of preliminary work items, this is not necessary. this is only necessary at a later stage when you activate the work item. So the 5 committed countries is only necessary when you create directly the new work item or when you decide to activate a preliminary work item. The decision to create a new work item for the development of a European standard or a technical specification is taken by weighted vote, except for amendments or revisions, and decisions for new work items for technical reports or revisions or amendments of standards or technical specifications within the same scope are taken by simple majority. Once the TC decision has been taken, it is the TC secretary that needs to register the new work item or preliminary work item through projects online. I think it's important to stress a point in relation to preliminary work items and their activation, and is that when you have a preliminary work item, it is important that the TC activates it before sending the draft to CCMC for enquiry or vote. I mean enquiry in the case of a European standard, or vote if it's a technical specification or a technical report. Otherwise, we will have to go back to the TC to ask that they take a decision to activate the work item before we can process the draft, which will mean that this will delay the processing of the draft. When we look at CENELEC and the CENELEC rules for creation of new work items, the decision has not been delegated to the technical committees, and the technical board needs to approve the creation of every new work item. The use of the new work item form is compulsory, and it's important that the information on the form, like the relation with existing directives, standardization requests, etc., is correct. It's also the case in CEN when you also use the form. You need to make sure that the information is correct, since this information is afterwards included in the database and is the basis to create, for example, list of harmonized standards to be sent to the Commission, etc. So please put attention to this. As you know, also under the Frankfurt Agreement, CENELEC is automatically offering new work items to become European standards to IEC. And if the TC would like to request an exception to this, for example, because there might be the work item might be linked to a standardization request or very much linked to European legislation, or because the TC has an exception from parallel procedures agreed by the CENELEC Technical Board. In this case, if you want an exception and that the European standard is not offered to IEC, you also need to justify it and include this in the form. Like in the case of CEN, in order to activate or create a new work item, the TC needs to have 5 committed countries to actively participate in the work. And requests for new work items or preliminary work items need to be sent to TC Minares, the email that you can see in the screen. New work items or activation of new work items will then be submitted to the CENELEC Technical Board for decision by correspondence. I just wanted to mention also what are the rules that apply to joint CEN-CENELEC technical committees. And in those cases, the decision on the creation of a new work item has not been delegated to the TCs. And as a result, it needs to be approved by both the CEN and CENELEC technical boards. In these cases also, the technical committee should also propose, when they agree on the work item, the lead organization. This is whether the work item will be developed under CEN or CENELEC lead. So that was for the creation of the new work items or preliminary work items. And the next step after the registration of the work item is the drafting of the deliverable by the technical committee or by a working group within the technical committee. So in the case of European standards, once the work item is registered or activated, the technical committee will have 8 months in order to deliver the draft for inquiry to the CEN-CENELEC Management Center, to CCMC. This could be extended to 12 months if requested or decided by the technical committee. And I think it's also important to point out that there is also the obligation to circulate a first working document within 4 months from registration. So the technical committee secretary can circulate this first working document and inform CCMC through e-trans in the case of CEN, and in the case of CEN-CENELEC TCs, this should be done by using the production email that is also included in the slide. In the case of technical specifications and technical report, the technical committee has by default 12 months instead of 8 before submitting the draft for vote to CCMC. And I will now give the floor to my colleague Frederic, who will further explain some issues you need to consider when drafting the text of your deliverable.
So, many thanks, Maitane. Please let me catch the ball and roll it for you and introduce you to further aspects related to drafting. Please be aware that the enquiry draft has to be drafted in accordance with the Internal Regulations Part 3, which you may find on the CEN bus, that it is supposed to be of good linguistic and editorial quality. And if you have a look inside the Internal Regulations Part 3, you may see the following principle: use language simple enough to be understood by all the expected standard users and not only experts. Please be aware that several guides may help you in drafting your deliverable. You may check out the CEN bus, CENELEC website, or CEN-CENELEC common portal. Please don't be worried if I'm getting you and telling you about all these references, because we'll show you the links at the end of our presentation. Now, please be aware regarding CEN drafts that they must be drafted with the CEN simple template or the STD template available on the CEN bus. Indeed, you may find these templates in the Forms and Template section at the end of the list. Please, to CENELEC technical bodies, please be aware that these templates exist, and feel free to use these because it is recommended. Now, another aspect regarding drafting CEN drafts is the quality of figures. Indeed, in the case of figures in CEN drafts, figures have to be provided as separate drawing files, either as stiff figures or EPS figures. They have to be language neutral, and they have to be created according to certain settings. What I mean by certain settings means they have a resolution. They have to have a resolution of 600 dpi, and they have to have an LZW compression and the sizing of 100%. When you hear me talking that way, you may think I'm talking like some type of technical language. Please be aware that these settings you may find in the drafting guidance regarding drafting of European standards electronic preparation, available on the CEN bus among the other guidance documents. And please be aware that these concern figures in CEN drafts, but if you are a CENELEC technical body, even if none of these rules apply, well, please, if you have figures ready to be provided to us, please pass these on to us, attached and inserted into a figure folder along the document when you send the document to CCMC. Now, another aspect regarding drafting, please be careful about annexes ZA and ZZ. Indeed, if your deliverable is candidate harmonized and candidate for citation, and if it is due to contain an annex ZA, if it is a CEN deliverable, or an annex CZ, if it is a CENELEC deliverable, please check out these web pages which you may find here. Regarding annexes ZA, you may find the templates of these annexes on the CEN bus among among the other forms and templates. Just like you may find annexes CZ templates on the CEN-CENELEC website in the list of forms and templates. Please let me jump to the following stage, which is the enquiry stage. So first, you may wonder, how am I supposed to deliver the text which I want to process for the enquiry? Well, please be aware that the enquiry draft has to be delivered once consensus is reached and not beforehand. For CEN-CENELEC drafts, you may have to create a zip file and upload it on the appropriate folder on each round. The process is different for CEN-CENELEC drafts. Indeed, you would have to attach the draft to an email and send it to us at the following email address: production@CEN-CENELEC.eu. One important note at this stage: please make sure you send the right deliverable and the right text version. In addition to that, please make sure you don't need to make any update or correction to the text. The enquiry draft has to be the draft you want to submit for enquiry, and no further update may be necessary at this stage once you send it to us. Regarding the processing and editing, here are CCMC's tasks within the following 5 weeks. The first task we will have is to allocate a reference number and then proceed to precise checks to determine suitability for processing. For instance, is there a corresponding active work item available to the project? Do the track and deliverable correspond to the database records? Or is the document complete and prepared using the correct template? Are the electronic figures available in a separate figure folder for CEN enquiries? Following task, well, allocate an editor, sometimes it's me, and allocate target start and end dates for the procedure, update the database, and edit the text in accordance with the internal regulations part 3. Now, regarding this work of editing, please be aware that the draft will be edited as Word, Acrobat, PDF, and XML, that it will be edited, which means that the rules from the internal regulations part 3 principles and rules for the structure and drafting of CEN and CENELEC documents will be applied, that this editing includes proofreading, extensive styling, and formatting on our account, and that the TC's attention, which is your attention, may be drawn to any potential issues with the draft. This editing work would be followed by a translation period, which means that at enquiry stage there will be an 8-week translation period, during which time the draft will be sent to the translation services at DIN on the CEN side or DKE on the CENELEC side, to AFNOR, and sometimes to BSI if the draft is to be translated in English. Please be aware that deliverables made under EU legislation will be sent at this stage to the consultant in charge by the start of the translation phase. And please be aware also that there might be possibilities for an extension for drafts that exceed a certain amount of pages. Regarding the encoding and circulation of the drafts, well, by the end of the 8-week translation period, CCMC will encode the titles and scopes of the translation periods and circulate the reference and translated versions onto each round for CEN drafts and onto the FTP platform for CENELEC drafts. Please be aware that if one or both additional language versions aren't available within the agreed time frame foreseen for translation, CCMC will automatically launch the procedure in the available language versions. So now regarding the compilation and circulation of commands. The enquiry period lasts 12 weeks, and immediately following this enquiry period, the commands and results will be compiled and circulated to the technical committee secretariat without delay, and which means that these will be made available the date after the closure of inquiry via e-trans for CEN or via an automatic email for CENELEC. Please let me send the ball to my colleague Maitane, who will talk to you about TC options after inquiry.
Okay, so once the inquiry has finished and you have the report, the TC secretary circulates this report to the TC, and in the case of standards for citation, also the assessment of the new approach consultant, if relevant, to the TC members. The TC members will analyze the comments received, and depending on the results, it can either decide to skip the formal vote and go directly to publication, or to make changes to the draft and continue to formal vote. The TC can only decide to skip the formal vote if the results of the vote during the inquiry are positive, and if once they have examined the comments received, they agree that no technical changes need to be introduced to the inquiry draft. So in order to skip the formal vote, the TC needs to take a decision by simple majority, and if the formal vote is skipped, I insist, editorial comments can be dealt with and will be dealt with by CCNC, and then the TC will receive the finalized text for proofing before translation if applicable and final publication. But as I said, it is important to underline that if the TC wants to introduce technical changes to the inquiry draft, it will need to continue to formal vote. In case a new approach consultant provided a negative assessment, the formal vote shall not be skipped unless the negative assessment can somehow be resolved without the need to introduce technical changes in the text. Regarding the comments received during the inquiry, each comment resulting from the CEN inquiry needs to be analyzed, evaluated, and a decision taken. This might be done during a common resolution meeting of the TC, or the TC can decide to delegate the resolution of comments to the level of a working group. And the decision regarding each of the comments to be recorded in the comments table needs to be recorded by the secretary. It is also important to say that if the TC decides to go to formal vote, if the TC decides to go to formal vote, it is important that the technical committee work having as the basis the inquiry draft that was edited by CCNC. So they need to use this text to implement the changes and update it before submitting the draft to formal vote. This is important because otherwise all the styling, editing work, etc. Made at the inquiry stage is lost. And using the edited inquiry draft provided by CCNC will make the editing work at this stage faster and easier. So you will find the edited draft version available either in eTrans, FTP platform, or on projects online. And finally, regarding this, I wanted to highlight that the CEN Technical Board has also decided recently that in order to improve transparency, the comments form fully completed shall be circulated to the TC when the formal vote is launched, and that the TC secretary shall also add the commenting form to the zip file that is uploaded on eTrans. I will now let Frederic continue with the last steps.
Many thanks, Maitane. So now let me show you the channels through formal vote. First, please be aware that if you want to deliver to us a draft for formal vote, well, please send it to us onto eTrans for CEN final drafts, or attached to an email sent to production@CEN-CENELEC.eu for CENELEC final drafts. And please be aware that the same rules apply for the quality of figures as for enquiry stage regarding CEN final drafts. Now, regarding the processing and editing, well, the steps are pretty much similar to what we do at the enquiry stage, which means that our tasks within the following weeks will pretty much consist in making precise checks to determine suitability for processing, allocating an editor and target start and end dates for the procedure, updating the database, and editing the text in accordance with the internal regulations, part 3. Now, indeed, please be aware that the final draft will be edited as Word, Acrobat PDF, and XML, but I don't have much to say about this because I already told you everything about this at enquiry stage. Indeed, editing includes similar steps as for the enquiry draft, which means applying the drafting rules from the internal regulations, part 3, proofreading, extensive styling, and formatting. Now, the biggest change at formal vote stage is that there will not be anymore a systematic translation period before the formal vote for ENs. Indeed, this applies to enquiry drafts that were submitted to CCMC after the 30th of June 2016, but knowing that, please be aware that it is, however, possible for translation members to introduce a specific request during the enquiry stage in order to request a 6-week pre-vote translation period for ENs. Please be aware, though, that regarding technical specifications, which means a vote on TS for technical specification, this will necessarily imply an 8-week translation period for these documents. Why? Because there is no enquiry for technical specifications. But please be aware that this won't make any difference for TRs, for which there is no translation period at all. Regarding the encoding and circulation of formal votes, well, what we do next at CCMC is encode the titles and scopes of the translations and then circulate the final drafts onto eTrans for send final drafts and onto the FTP platform for CENELEC final drafts. This will be followed by an 8-week formal vote period or a 12-week period for vote on TS or vote on TR. Please be aware that deliverables made under EU legislation will be sent to a consultant in charge at this stage by the start of the formal vote. Now, this will be followed by finalization, which means within the next 5 weeks after the closure of the vote, CCMC will prepare the voting period and circulate it to members for information, onto eTrans for send homegrown documents on the first working day just after the closure of the vote, or attached to automatic emails for CENELEC homegrown documents. But this will be on the Monday that follows the closure of the vote. CCMC, as you can read here, then has 2 weeks to allocate publications and implementation dates and edit the publication and handle the comments. The TC technical body is then given 3 weeks to prove the finalized text and reply to each comment. Please be aware, finally but not least, that no technical changes are allowed at publication stage. Now, this is followed by the finalization of the publication by CCMC following the TC's replies to the comments. Then at publication stage, you can see nice dictionaries laying on a desk on the photo. This means that there is now a 4-week translation period for ENs and TSs to the translation services at DIN or DKE, AFNOR and or BSI, except for TRs for which there is no translation period. And then the reference and translated versions are encoded and circulated. Please, Naitane.
So just quickly to finish, in this slide you just see some links where you can find useful information, templates, etc. But just to end up, just some key points that you need to remember. First of all, be careful to use the appropriate templates and form for new work items, annexes set, etc. Include in the new work item form accurate information regarding mandates or standardization requests and EU legislation. As we explained, this is important and is used in the database, so it's important that this is correct. And rely on the CEN simple templates to draft your deliverable. This will ease the work of the editors. Very important, no technical changes after formal vote or to enquiries draft if the TC decides to publish after inquiry. This is important and we would really like to highlight this. And no systematic translation anymore before formal vote for European standards.
Okay, thank you, Maitane. Thank you, Frederic.